It's another episode of Social Distancing at the Chamber. My name is Garrick Taylor. Sometimes we call this segment Happy Hour with Hammer because we're joined by the CEO of the Arizona Chamber, Glenn Hammer. Good to see you, Glenn.
Great to see you, Garrick.
We've got a special guest today, and he hails from a place where the Taylor family has spent much too much discretionary income over the years. Glenn, I know that when some of us think of San Diego, some of us think of Tony Gwynn or Dan Fouts, but I know in Chamberlain we all think of Jerry Sanders. So why don't you give a proper introduction to our special guest?
Thank you, Garrick. And not only is Jerry the president and CEO of one of the country's most well-regarded chambers of commerce, but previously in his career, he was one of the youngest police chiefs in the city's history, the CEO of the United Way, and he was also a highly successful two-term mayor of San Diego. I know whenever we speak of Jerry Sanders, Garrick always calls him Mr. Mayor. Jerry Sanders, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
And I'm going to admit, I first have to ask, what's the temperature there?
Well, it's probably about 79, 80 today. So it's just about perfect.
And I'm going to admit, we have at least one member of the Arizona Chamber of Commerce and Industry that is somewhere in San Diego right now. And I don't think she's going to come back for quite some time.
Right.
Well, we enjoy getting our guests from Arizona. We consider ourselves a suburb of Phoenix.
And I also just want to thank you before we get into the reason why we're here. You've got a great team, and I just appreciate Paula in your shop has done a better job than anyone in the country, in my opinion, of really rallying chambers and business leaders from across the United States on trade. And when you look at the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement that took effect last week, I give your chamber great credit for that accomplishment.
Well, Paola is a force of nature, and she's very passionate about her work. And we're just a cross-border region. We consider ourselves one community, and the trade's important, but also the families are important, and just about every aspect of Baja and San Diego. So it was really a pleasure to watch Paola go to town on that. We're very excited that it's finally in operation now, just for 5 days.
As are we. As I mentioned in the intro, in addition to leading one of the country's top chambers, also serving as former mayor and police chief, you recently wrote an op-ed for the San Diego Union-Tribune that caught my eye, where you said, in quotes, "In retrospect, I must take responsibility for not more closely monitoring and focusing on the police department's policing tactics when I was mayor." Jerry, can I ask you what prompted you to write that op-ed in the first place and to arrive at the conclusion that you did?
Well, I was approached by the editorial page director and asked me to comment on. That's when we were having some protests in San Diego and some violence and some damage on one of them. And at first I didn't want to do it, and then I thought I really need to do it. My wife is also she was in policing. She was a New York City cop, and then worked in the White House on policing issues, and did international consulting on crime reduction and problem solving. So we pretty much wrote that together. If it sounded good, she wrote it. But I came from an era when I was chief and before that, where we had a community policing model that was really looked by the country as being one of the top ones. And it was really because it was driven by the community and driven by our police officers. It was a bottom-up approach where they became very good at working with the community, at allowing the community to direct their policing efforts to what they wanted and how they wanted to be policed. And I left in 1999, and I think that we had changed our police academy to reflect that. And then after 2001, the government funding for policing really changed because of what happened in New York. All of a sudden it wasn't a community policing model they were funding, it was more of a military model because they wanted eyes on the street, they wanted police departments prepared. And I think that policing changed very dramatically during that period of time.
How confident are you that the San Diego model can be achieved. And I know in your piece you also wrote about the importance of making sure that good models of policing are institutionalized. So when new police chiefs or mayors come in, those models by and large remain in place.
Well, I think it gets institutionalized in the training, and police officers are no different than football players or basketball players. You play like you train. And if you have a model that's based on, a community awareness model, on, really on how you solve problems and how you interact, you demilitarize the academy. It's not a boot camp, and it shouldn't be a boot camp. Police officers go out, and 90% of what they do is discretionary. It's not like being in the military, and you don't want them to feel that way. And we had done that through the Peace Officers and Standards and Training Commission. We changed our academy, very directly to make sure we were giving that latitude and training them in how to go out and solve problems and work with the community. So I'm very confident it can work. We tried it out in our busiest precinct, and the one that had the most violent crime and the one that had the most radio calls. Our officers there did it perfectly. They reduced radio calls dramatically. They reduced crime dramatically. We saw that in the model in 6 years, crime went down by 49% in San Diego. That includes homicides through property crimes. And it was the officers in the community that drove that crime decrease. So just as an example, 165 homicides in 1992. When I left in 1999, 42 homicides for a city of 1.3 million people. And you have to credit the community for knowing what the issues were, for knowing who the problems were, and being willing to work with the police to solve that. And I'm very confident that police departments can do that given the right leadership. The police officers look to leadership for the message that they're giving them and for the expectations they have. And we've seen officers do a great job on it.
And Jerry, I come originally from the other side of the country, from New York, from the New York City area. And, over the years, we've always heard a lot about what happened there. But, what I appreciated learning from your op-ed and from this conversation, there was a different model in San Diego, in your city, that worked very well and is, to me, very applicable for the times that we're in today.
Well, I think so also. And there were two models of policing at that time. There was a New York stop and frisk and zero tolerance model, which produced about the same crime decrease. However, they had about 6 times the numbers of officers per thousand as San Diego. And we were able to decrease exactly the same amount with a fairly small police department comparatively. And I think we got, the community bought into it. The biggest problem I had as chief was when I wanted to transfer an officer out of a community to another community. And the community, they were so tight, it was difficult to do those types of things. So I felt very lucky to have problems like that. So it was a good experience. And to be quite frank with you, it was my fault it went back probably to some extent. I became mayor in 2005. The city was bankrupt. Hadn't had audits in 6 years. Had 1,800 people. We didn't even know how they were paid. And then the recession hit and the police department was still functioning, although not using that model as much as we had given it the emphasis on doing. And crime was down, and I took my eye off of the police department and I looked at other matters. And in retrospect, I should have really demanded different things out of the police chief.
Well, I'll just say, I think when we look at San Diego today, it's an incredible city. And, I'm an Arizona chamber guy, so I've got to be careful what I say. But given the fact that we actually have people on the ground right now in San Diego from the Arizona chamber says something about your city. Jerry, there's been a lot of conversation about the role of unions and all of what's been going on in terms of looking at policing. Just your thoughts on unions and just how that issue should be thought through.
It all depends on the union. We have an association, the Police Officers Association. It's a union. But, you know, we've always had some pretty progressive people over there. And I'll give you an example. We started a retired senior volunteer program, one of the first in the country, back in early 90s. And most police unions would not allow that to happen in their cities. Our police union welcomed them. We finally had over 1,100 retired senior volunteers, and they were out doing things that police officers didn't need to do. And our union recognized that as augmenting what they needed to have done so they could be free for other things. Some of the unions, though, do get too wrapped up in protecting the police officers to the detriment of discipline, to the detriment of the community. And I think that's where that line is kind of, you know, it's different probably in each city. And you're going to find some progressive leadership, and then you're going to find some leadership that is just straight union down the line. And I think when you have that, that's what usually happens is the city and the negotiations have given up too much. So when they do negotiations on pay and other things, politicians like to give in to the police departments and the unions because they see that as a core constituency. And pretty soon you've got such a convoluted system, it doesn't make any sense to the community or the police chief.
Jerry, my final question that I have, you know, you lead a large chamber. How much are you hearing from your members in terms of the importance of your chamber getting involved in issues like racial equality and just civil rights matters?
Well, I was a little nervous about writing the op-ed, and I didn't sign it CEO of the chamber. I felt I had a moral obligation to do it as a person. But when I went to our management council, which is our executive committee, a couple of days later, they were very involved in it, and they said they thought it was the right thing to do. And we had a board meeting a week later, and they said that they thought that was an important issue for San Diego. So we've received a lot of support. We've just started an All Our Talent initiative, which is promoting and tracking women on boards and commissions, and that's corporate boards and commissions. And we have had unbelievable responsiveness from our entire board of directors. So I think what they're seeing, there's a business case for diversity. There's a business case for us working with the community. And there's a business case for women in terms of boards and commissions and all that. And we've seen all the studies, and they all show companies more profitable. They can move more nimbly. So I really feel fortunate to have the board and management council that we have in San Diego.
Jerry, that proposal sounds really very good, and maybe one we need to take a look at here in Arizona.
Well, we'd love to share it with you.
Jerry, Garrick, you've got a big fan in Garrick Taylor. Garrick, any final thoughts, questions? What we have?
Just one, Jerry. You've worn both the police chief hat and the mayor's hat. And just think about the time that we're in. We're in summer in San Diego. I think of things like Padres baseball and horse racing at Del Mar and Comic-Con. Those things are looking very different. Or in the case of Comic-Con, it's not happening at all. Are you worried about city coffers and city budgets and perhaps the resources not going into police departments that need to?
Well, I worry about the resources. I mean, 1/3 of a city budget is made up, or it's the third largest driver is tourism. I mean, you know, that's simply it. It's hundreds of millions of dollars from hotel tax and from what we get from retail around the tourism areas. The city's budget is way out of whack right now, and they've done a good job at plugging holes and all of that. But it's not just the police department, it's everybody. And I think when you're looking at budgets, and one of the things that I talked about is we've got police officers doing a lot of things they shouldn't be doing. They should not be the point of the spear on homelessness. They're ill-equipped to handle that, from the psychological to the substance abuse resources. And I think that we need to be thinking about handling that differently. And you can handle that with less money. By hiring people who aren't sworn police officers, because they're an expensive part of the equation. So, you know, our budget will come back when everything starts getting to whatever normal is going to look like in the next year. You know, I don't anticipate it changing much this year, but as we get into 2021 and start seeing things change, that'll all bounce back. But I think that this gives us really a pivotal time to rethink how we do things as a government, whether it's online things that we swore we could never do. You know, we said we could never give building permits online, and now they're doing building permits online. So this gives us a tremendous opportunity as a government to change our processes and the way we look at budgets and the way we look at getting city work done. So I think in the long run, it's going to be really beneficial to everybody. In the short term, it's horrible. You guys are facing it right now also, and it's just, you just wish we could get out of this somehow, and it's going to be painful, and we'll get out and we'll be smarter when we do.
Well said.
Jerry, I love how you framed it. Tough now, but we're going to learn some things, and there's, you know, we will get to a more normal state with some learnings, and you know, that's something we could all look forward to. Hopefully sooner rather than later.
Right.
Well, Jerry, thanks for taking the time to visit with us today. And when the smoke clears, more Phoenicians will be on their way to San Diego to help prop up the San Diego economy. So thanks again for taking the time.
Garrick, thank you. Glenn, thank you. I enjoyed talking with you.